Good evening, Charleston, and welcome to this evening's Community Justice Forum provided by the Charleston County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, or as we affectionately call it, the CJCC. We appreciate your presence and thank you for your participation. We're looking forward to a rewarding evening together. The purpose of this evening's conversation is to really share two things with you. Share information and data around trends and what we've learned within the local justice system, and to talk about ongoing community engagement opportunities where we want Charleston to become even more engaged with the work of the CJCC. So welcome again for tonight's event. We have a wonderful slate of speakers that's going to be present with us, that are present with us this evening, and that will share information with us. We want to acknowledge them and just really appreciate them for being here. The other thing I want to do also is to just, my eyes, everyone is going to the chat. And so if it seems like I'm kind of darting away from what I'm saying, it's only that. But I am with you, I am present with you. I'd like to start with introducing the speakers that we do have with us. We actually have two others and we hope that they will be able to join us as well, but duty calls, and so we certainly understand that. But our first panelist with us this evening is Judge Ellen Steinberg. She currently serves as the West Ashley Magistrate, and she is a co-vice chair of the CJCC. Prior to being appointed to the bench, Judge Steinberg served as the assistant solicitor here in Charleston. Thank you for being here, Judge. Our next panelist is Kristy Danford. Kristy is a data-guided collaborative reformer with over 2 decades of experience. As the founding director of the CJCC, she's helped lead the unit's transformative efforts to safely reduce the overuse of jails, identifying and addressing inequities, and engaging the community in improving the local criminal justice system. Thank you for being here this evening, Kristy, and thank you for all of your work. And while our panelists all serve in different roles to the Charleston community, they're all united in wanting one thing, and that is the best quality of life for everyone living in Charleston County. This evening, we're going to start off with some very important information. Again, some data, some lessons and things that we've learned over the course of the work of the CJCC. But before we do that, we want to pause for a moment of acknowledgement. And I'm going to ask Judge Steinberg if she would do that for us on this evening, just acknowledging where we are currently in terms of our current social climate around things that's happening locally and across the country. Judge?
Thank you, Gwen. As we all know, the past few weeks, our country and even our own local community, we've suffered horrific tragedies. People's lives have been and are forever changed. I'm asking everybody to take a moment and join me in this moment of silence as we reflect, remember, and honor their memories. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Judge, for that. And thank you, participants, for being willing to follow and to do that. We really appreciate it. So for right now, what we're going to do is launch into some of the sharing of information. Kristy has prepared information for us. There will be a slide presentation identifying and pointing out some of the data. Keith will be, and so we want to go ahead and allow her to get started with that. Now, again, as I said, we do have two other panelists that are joining us that we hope to join us. We know that one is on the way. And so we will pause to allow them to be introduced, and then we will move forward in our presentation for the evening. Kristy?
Thank you, and thank you for the great introduction, Gwen, and thank you, Judge Steinberg. I'm going to just do my job, which is to be the CJCC director, and my role is really to help lift up the work of the CJCC and help bring it together in a way that can be digestible and acted upon. And I apologize, my cell phone keeps coming off as one of our other panelists is trying to join, so I apologize for that. Adina, if you click the slide, I just want to kind of, if you're here, you probably know who the CJCC is, but I just want to kind of lift up the fact that in the last year, the CJCC membership had a governance committee and unanimously approved updated bylaws. And those bylaws for the first time included a vision statement, which we didn't have prior till then. And the vision is really to foster a criminal justice system that's fair, just, and equitably applied. Our mission has stayed the same as it was since its founding, and that's really to help make sustainable data-driven improvements to Charleston's criminal justice system. And the thing of the CJCC, you know, when we started, we were the first staff CJCC in the state. There's now almost a handful across South Carolina, and I'm very excited about that. And the real value of the CJCC is that it's a sustained group looking comprehensively at the system, at the whole system, to really look at and address common challenges and to pursue agreed upon solutions. And those leaders are coming at it from various perspectives, whether it's defense, prosecution, law enforcement, civil rights, court administration, judiciary, a whole host of different perspectives working together as a community to help our system do a better job of serving our community. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what we do with our data to help see what these trends have been in the Charleston community. I just want to point out that this data is possible because we are able to bring in data from 15 different sources. So it's law enforcement, courts, the jail, you know, pretrial database, all different ways that we're looking at how our municipal and magistrate courts, also known as our summary courts, as well as our circuit court, our general sessions court, and collectively how in the system what's happening there and how do we look at it. So we have different things that we look at on a regular basis, some daily, some weekly, some monthly. And then once a year, we publish an annual report that helps look across trends year over year. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what some of these trends have been since our baseline year in 2014 through 2021. And you'll see, you know, throughout the chat and different things as we go on, how you can get this information too. It's all available on our website. But one of the biggest things that we looked at in the beginning of how our system was functioning was really how we were using our jail. And what we saw was a lot of jail use for municipal and magistrate type charges, some of which, you know, just kind of made law enforcement question or made community members question, why are we doing this? You know, we're causing unnecessary use of jail and taking officers off the street. We also looked at the data from an equity lens and saw that we were disproportionately bringing Black individuals to jail at much higher rates than white individuals, particularly for different charges, like simple possession of marijuana. It was 8 Black individuals for every 1 white individual. One of the earliest reforms the CJCC did was to say, well, let's rethink jail use. Let's, you know, avoid jail use when we don't need to do it, when we can issue a citation as opposed to bringing somebody to jail for a lower level charge like open container or simple possession of marijuana. What that has led to from 2014 to 2021 is a reduction in local bookings into our jail by 65%. And that's a big, big change. And if you'll click the next slide, I just want to point out that that is not a change in what's happening as much as it's a change in the decision. The decision to use jail on municipal and magistrate charges saw the greatest change, where we see that those kinds of charges coming into our jail are now down by 80%. And you'll see that flat line, that green line that goes across your screen. Those are the charges headed to General Sessions Court. Those are the higher level misdemeanor and felony charges. Those have maintained a relatively steady trend over the years. And if you'll click the next slide, you can see part of those alternatives, of choosing not to use jail on lower level things also means dealing with the underlying symptoms of what people may be facing, whether it's mental illness, substance use disorders, homelessness. With a partnership with Charleston Dorchester Mental Health Center, we've been tracking how law enforcement is accessing different services that they provide. So how can we deflect someone from coming into the system if they'd be better served in another area, or divert them out of the system so they don't fall deeper into it where it's not necessary. COVID was a little bit of a challenge because having access to certain resources was stymied with the need for different types of testing and safety concerns. But what you can see on this slide with just a little bit of information here is just how law enforcement over the years has been referring people to the Tri-County Crisis Stabilization Center. And when that service wasn't as available due to COVID, you saw an uptick in drop-off straight to the mental health clinic itself over on Charlie Hall Boulevard, the use of mobile police triage services, as well as working with embedded clinicians that are in our major law enforcement agencies. So really trying to find better ways to work at the root issues that are going on, as opposed to just defaulting to jail use. One of the other areas that we looked at were who were the folks that were churning most rapidly through our system. The term that we've used in the data for a couple of years now is familiar faces. And these are individuals that are booked 3 or more times in a 2-year period. We studied these folks at nauseum. Within there's a lot of crimes against public order charges. We've got deeper dive information on this in our report. I won't go through the weedy details with it, but the big picture here is by changing how we use jail use and looking into alternatives, we ended up seeing a 75% decrease in familiar face bookings, again, from 2014 to 2021. And if you'll click the next slide, what we see through the years is that jail use not only changed in bookings, but the average daily jail population that we draw as an annualized figure over the 12 months of the year, we ended up seeing a 40% decrease from 2014 to 2021. Jail use now is primarily pretrial, meaning individuals that are incarcerated and awaiting court on at least one charge. So they're still presumed innocent. Within those shifts and changes of the types of charges coming into our jail, remember the general session stayed pretty steady while the lower level court charges went down significantly. The average length of stay has gone up. So we're looking at a doubling of the pretrial length of stay for those who are released from 10 to 20 days. And then the sentence population got much smaller, and those that were there are staying much longer. And just as a reminder, and folks, if you don't know, in South Carolina, sentences of 91 days or greater are headed to the South Carolina Department of Corrections. Sentences less than that stay in the local detention centers. All right, if you'll click the next slide. With this work, and you see these big drops in municipal and magistrate charges, what we also saw were pretty big drops in the rates of local booking by relative to the adults in the Charleston County area, as well as relative to Black adults or white adults. So the rate of booking for all adults in Charleston County reduced by 67% from a rate of 81 per 1,000 people down to 26 per 1,000 people. That rate was the most pronounced with Black adults in Charleston County. It went from 178 per 1,000 all the way down to 58. It was a 67% drop. White adults started at 48 per 1,000 and are down to almost 17 per 1,000. So those rates dropped pretty significantly in terms of booking. That would be opening and walking into the jail doors. The rate of incarceration also declined, and the rate of incarceration is different because most people that go into the jail book and release, and they do so relatively quickly. Rate of incarceration is really most often that group in our case, most likely pretrial detainees awaiting court in general sessions. So they've been there and they've been there for quite a while. But the the rate of incarceration per 1,000 for all adults went from 47 per 1,000 down to 29. For Black adults, it went from 132 down to 81 per 1,000. And white adults started at almost 17 and went down to about 13. So if you click the next slide, while we've seen some impressive drops in rates of booking and rates of incarceration, we look at this and we say, well, what is the relative rate? And what we see here in 2014, we were incarcerating about 8 Black individuals for every 1 white individual in our jail. Fast forward to 2021, that rate is now 6.5 Black individuals to 1 white individual. And similarly with bookings, we still see the overrepresentation of Black adults, although those rates did come down slightly since 2014. So we're at 3.46 Black to every 1 white. So we've made a lot of changes, and some of those disparate impacts still persist. And that's really one of the areas of work that is to be continued, and to also look broader beyond the criminal justice system as well. The next area of work really happens in what comes next. If somebody's booked into the jail, they'll be headed to, in most cases, a bond hearing in centralized bond court within 24 hours of the arrest. So this was an area that really had little information prior to the implementation of some of the reform work that went on. And what we saw were judges who had maybe a rap sheet, an incident report. Rarely was there an attorney present. And the default reaction was typically the use of a monetary bond, meaning you'd have to pay to secure your release. The presumption in South Carolina state law is presumption of release on your own recognizance, unless there's a safety or flight risk. And then whatever those minimally restrictive conditions would be what would be needed, as folks are still presumed innocent while they're awaiting their disposition in court. 2 main issues that were tackled there was, one, trying to get the judges more information, objective information, to help them through this process. So we implemented pretrial service reports. And that process unfolded and has given us more data, more information, and really just been a tool for the judges and prosecution and defense to use day in and day out at centralized bond court. By the end of 2021, they were getting those pretrial service reports in 95% of the bond hearings. The other big change was the first time in the state of South Carolina was to put public defenders in bond court so that individuals would have access to representation. That started, also slow, but by the end of 2021, it was up to about 43% of those bond hearings. And I could see Judge Steinberg is like itching to say something, so I'm going to pause for a second.
I can't help but to really emphasize what a dramatic change having the pretrial service reports when you're in bond court, and also especially having public defender representation. Prior to that, as Kristy was saying, bond court, all a judge would have was a criminal history. That was it. And you had to make a decision within 24 hours. This has been such a huge change and so significant. I just feel like I just want to blow it up for everyone to notice. I'll let you continue. Thank you.
And with that, there's more information, right? And we'll get a little bit more into that as we go forward. But it's that consistency. The other thing that was new under the most recent CJCC strategic plan was the implementation of bond court observations. And that's really an opportunity to observe what's happening in bond court and help increase alignment with state and national standards to really make sure the rights are being upheld and the laws being carried out. And we're having meaningful and just bond hearings. So those were first implemented, and by the end of 2021, there were 267 different observations. The other thing that we do here is look at the data really closely, examine the data to see what happens. So we've had numerous pretrial outcome studies. If you'll click the slide, it's kind of like you can look at it at a different time, but you're still going to see a similar result. Our most recent analysis, which is in the annual report, was looking at an 18-month window to see, we had roughly 6,200 folks that went through bond hearings, and we looked at them to see, did they release while their case was still pending? And if they're released, what do they look like? And then what happened? Were there any new arrests in the pretrial period? Was there a court appearance violation? And what we learned is similar to what we've seen in the past. Most defendants release pretrial. The majority of the defendants that are releasing pretrial are in the lower half of risk levels, meaning they're less likely to get a new arrest or have a safety appearance violation. And what we see overall, looking at this 18-month sample of 6,200, once we looked at all the releases that came out, 68% had not been arrested or had a court appearance violation. So most are successful. And you could see in the little infographic there, the percentage of success is highest at the lowest level 1, 83% successful, and it kind of goes down as the level goes up. So by the time we get to the level 4, which is the highest level that we have currently, it's a 45% success rate. So this is good news. Majority are successful. Now let's talk a little bit about those that are not successful. If you'll click the slide, we're looking at about 32% of releases were not successful. And what we know about that from the data is the majority of those violations were new arrests and not necessarily appearance violations. Keep in mind, this was also part of this window is during COVID, so there wasn't a lot of appearances to be had, but the majority really were new arrests. We see persistently that those released on money bonds experience failure at higher rates. That's overall, as well as by each individual level of risk. The money bonds are not effective. And the defendants that are getting rearrested, they're doing so relatively quickly. They're being returned to jail on a new arrest within 6 months. And these folks can get rearrested more than once. So that's really an area of focus. There's a study that's wrapping up that's really diving deeper into the individual case and system characteristics to really drill deeply down into, well, who are these individuals that are doing the repeat offending, and are they sexually violent crime or not? And what can we learn from it, and how can we change? This is really a big area of focus, because the next step we're going to look at is what happens next. And that's really, how long does it take for somebody who is awaiting their court case, how long does it take for that to happen? And if you'll click the next slide, one of the early things that we did in circuit court was to say, okay, well, it takes a long time to get to disposition, to get that resolution of the case, but what are some things that can happen quickly? So that meant getting attorneys assigned faster, not only public defenders, but assistant solicitors. It meant transferring evidence faster and investing in technology to help make sure that evidence can get uploaded from law enforcement to prosecution and distributed to defense. And what we see there is that system's working. It's got a lot of different, almost 400 law enforcement officers, 60 public defenders, and over 400 private attorneys are all using the system implemented by the solicitor's office to upload and transfer discovery. And we've seen some good strides in those initial stages of case processing, with initial discovery transferred faster and attorneys assigned faster. And then the big issue, if you'll click the next slide, is the then what? And that then what is, how long does it take to go from the point of arrest to the resolution of that case? And we've been seeing that time tick up year over year. We are at a median time to disposition. So the middle number, that means half of the cases that disposed were faster than that, and half of the cases that disposed took longer than that. But the median time to disposition for all cases in 2021 was 592 days. It's about 6 months longer than it was when we first started tracking this in 2015. The other two lines you'll see on there is the gray line is for out of custody at the time of disposition, while the darker navy blue line is for in custody at the time of disposition. So there's a big window there between an arrest and some of those initial steps and then the actual resolution of the case. And if you'll click the next slide, the other area that we've looked into is, well, how do these cases dispose? And we see the majority of cases, the overwhelming majority of cases, resolve either through some type of a dismissal or a guilty plea. Less than 1% of all the dispositions between 2018 and 2021 were trial related. So the bulk of the activity is happening in pleas and dismissals. So these are, big questions, and these are issues that span across the state of South Carolina. They're not, specifically unique just to the Ninth Circuit here in Charleston County. And this is, we sort of take into consideration the pretrial challenges that we see in terms of success or failure while awaiting their disposition and the time it takes to get this disposition. That's really the area of greatest need there. So if you'll click the next slide, with the case processing challenges and COVID and delays in court activity, one of the indicators that we use is called the clearance rate, and that's really looking at on a certain time period, are we taking in more cases than we're disposing or not? So if it's over 100%, we're disposing more cases than we're getting new charges coming in. If it's under 100%, we're basically adding to the backlog because we aren't disposing as many as are coming in. So as you can see, towards the end of 2020 and the first couple quarters of 21, we were under 100%. Those numbers, I'm happy to say, are shifting, and they're growing. So far this year, we're up to 126%. So that backlog is not really accruing as much as it's starting to get chipped away at. And the next slide will give you a little bit more kind of where do we go from here perspective, with the two big issues of improved pretrial success and reduced time to disposition. So if we can push that window smaller in how long it takes to get a case to disposition and improve supportive services or options all the way from release with no condition to the use of detention when it's necessary for community safety, that is one of the strategic goals of the CJCC moving forward is to really build out what a proposal in South Carolina for pretrial service options would look like, because we have to do both simultaneously. We have to improve pretrial outcomes, and we have to reduce that time it takes to get to disposition. So we've got lots of initiatives underway and really sort of increasingly focusing more and more, and hopefully work well enough on the pretrial side that we can start talking about the post-dispositional side too in the future. So if you'll click the next slide, I just want to kind of lift up for folks who are interested. The strategic plan is almost in its 2-year, 3-year plan. This was a plan that we developed with Gwen's help, Q's help, the community's help. Over 1,200 people participated in the development of the strategic plan. And it really helped us to kind of come together as a community to say, where are the areas of need and focus? What are the community priorities? What does the data tell us? How do we bring this together to take some meaningful, comprehensive steps forward for the Charleston community? So we have 4 different work groups that actively meet. We have a community engagement and disparity work group that's working, just to kind of help make this information more accessible and available. We have a community engaged research study underway looking at the impacts of racial and ethnic disproportionality and disparity in our system. We are excited to be developing a race equity fellowship program to help build leaders as agents of change to help address disparities in the community, not just in the criminal justice system, but really looking across the entirety of Charleston County, from education to business and so forth. That's a really exciting program that will be developed in the next year. We've got a whole work group that looks at strengthening jail diversion and deflection, and they're looking at a small scale pilot program for our most visible of persons who are routinely caught in that cycle of jail and homelessness. A research study that'll be coming out soon on the impacts of diversion and deflection on health and outcomes for the individuals that can get diverted or deflected from the system. The work group also looks routinely at dashboards and crime trends and jail use. We have a work group that's focusing on bond and reentry that continues as bond court observations I mentioned earlier, working on that proposal. And we had a vista for a year, her year with us, unfortunately coming to an end soon, but it's been working closely with the SC211 to help really build out and bolster more of the information available to folks who may be returning to our community or have a loved one, going through the system, from incarceration or any point in the system to help build out some of that in the 2-in-1, since it is a sustainable centralized platform. And then, of course, there is the case processing work group that is really focused on what can be done to help get improvements in that area, which is, I said it earlier, it's a big issue here and across the state. When charges get made and arrests happen, what happens next, in that whole process to get that case all the way to disposition, and the justice for the folks charged, for the victims, for the whole community. That's really where that work group is. So I'm going to take a breath and stop talking and hopefully kick it back to Gwen. So please feel free to chime in if you have questions, comments. Really happy that you're here and joining us tonight. Thank you.
Gosh, Kristy, thank you so much for that very, very important information. Oftentimes, those of us who are not sort of data folks, we wonder, we may ask, well, why is all of that necessary? But it's so important to be informed, because if you or a loved one, a family member, a colleague, anyone that may have some experience with the system, in a sense, it's so important that you understand just how it works so that you can also inform others. And all of the things that she shared, all of the pieces around the different sections of the system, they have an impact on everyone who is either directly impacted with the system, or they are the family member, they are a survivor, but we're all connected in that system in some type of way. And so the numbers are important. The way that the system works is important, right? How it shows up in your life, the impact is very important. So we really do appreciate all of the information, all of the work that the CJCC has done to put this information together and to make it available to us. So thank you again for sharing that. And please note that that report is available for the public, for the community, by visiting the website. I do want to acknowledge that another one of our panelists is here. We want to welcome Keith at this time. And very quickly, a little bit about Keith. Keith serves as a violence intervention prevention client advocate at MUSC. He's also the founder and the executive director of My Community's Keeper Mentor Group. He serves as a co-vice chair along with Judge Steinberg for the CJCC. And Keith is a frequent speaker on community issues, including gun violence prevention, criminal justice reform, and grassroots community improvement. Welcome, Keith, and thank you for being here this evening. So happy to have you. What we want to do now is really just shift just for a moment. And we do want to, if you have specific questions related to the data that Kristy shared, you want to drop those in the chat. We will definitely try to address those. Find information on serving as a community representative. Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Suzanne. We will try to address those in the chat. But right now, I do want to just ask Judge Steinberg and Keith a couple of questions about, one, serving on the CJCC, but also just maybe a brief response to some of the data that was shared by Kristy. When you look at some of the things that she pointed out, what we need to do in terms of improving pretrial services or reducing that time between disposition. So again, Judge Steinberg, what are some of your initial thoughts about the information that was shared?
So let me kind of bring you a different perspective. Before we had the CJCC, before Kristy was providing and collecting all of this data, as lawyers, we didn't really do numbers so much. And Kristy has truly trained us, educated us as to why this is so important.
Mhm.
It has made a tremendous difference in the criminal justice system here in Charleston, being able to see what the numbers are, that we make one little change,
Mhm.
and it's a really big change. When Kristy was talking about how low-level misdemeanor charges like trespassing,
Mhm.
simple possession of marijuana, shoplifting, instead of the officers on the scene arresting them and bringing them into the detention center, we're doing something which is called cite and release, which is writing a ticket, a uniform traffic ticket. And it has made a significant difference in the number of people who are in the detention center, who need to be in the detention center.
Mhm.
The other thing that I really want to talk about real quickly is the CJCC has been that place for everyone to come together at the same table, at the same level.
Mhm.
Nobody is higher or more important than anyone else. And that has made really a significant difference in talking to each other and making changes. I could keep going, but I'll let Keith jump in now.
Thank you,
I-
Judge, for that. Keith?
Yeah, I think we both, and when we get to talking about the CJCC, can just keep going on and on. But I definitely, well, a couple of points that you made that I wanted to kind of piggyback off was something like before the CJCC.
Mhm.
And I don't, I know that time. I think we'll get into, why I became a member of the CJCC. Being one with lived experience, serving, excess of 19 years in the South Carolina Department of Correction. I knew how, the system was, the local criminal justice system was before the CJCC's inception in 2015, and I've seen the drastic change
Mhm.
since then. The one thing that blew my mind wide open was the bond hearing.
Mhm.
And I've told Kristy that in the beginning, that I was just amazed, right? And I kind of laugh a little bit about it because there's a couple of different things that I can say. But one thing I can say is like, I think realizing that this was something that the CJCC had put into play, right? I was like, okay, I need to be here. This is things that are actually happening here. This is where I need to be. Others need to follow me into this space. This space is welcome for those with lived experience, those who come from the community. We need to come here so we can learn more about, how are these things coming about. And then the other side of it, I kind of laughed at. When things had changed as far as certain charges like cite and release, I had to tell guys, don't think y'all getting away with nothing now. This the CJCC really working. Y'all think all of a sudden they ain't like, oh no, y'all not really getting away. This is what the CJCC is doing right here. This is stuff, policies and things that are when these system actors get together and agree, not just agree to disagree, but they're definitely agreeing that there is an issue. Here's the problem. Here's the low hanging fruit. These are the issues. Hey, let's take this and let's do away with this, and then we got a different part that we can work from. So it's just been a great experience with the
Mhm.
CJCC. Now I tell you, listening to data in the beginning, I was like, just I don't know about all this data stuff, but I understand now more than ever the importance of the data and how it works into this perfect space that's needed in order for the work to get done.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you so much for that response to that particular question. I know there's a comment in the chat about um, stealing cars and the impact that that has on the cite and release. Um, I don't know. Yes.
I was just trying, Judge, you can add, those those still go to jail. The ones that
Yes.
the option for cite and release is misdemeanor shoplifting, and those typically have the consent of the merchant. Judge, if you want to add to that, but stealing a car, that's going to jail. And then the hearing, and the process will unfold through the court system. Judge, do you want to add to that? You're welcome.
Right. Thank you, Kristy. And again, you have to make a difference between a low-level misdemeanor and a higher level misdemeanor. the there is a really significant difference. And the other thing, there has to be a mind shift. Just because somebody is breaking the law doesn't mean they have to go to jail. And that's something that's really hard for us as Americans to start to process, because we're so used to thinking as soon as you break the law, you go to jail. But not every single crime warrants going to jail. Going to jail for even one night or two nights can have a dramatic effect on people, on their lives, on their jobs, on their family. And I think it's something that we really need to pay attention to.
Great comments. Thank you so much, Judge, for that. And thank you, Kristy, for that clarification. Want to shift here quickly. Keith, we're going to come back to you, and we want to talk about the importance of something that you said in your comments about we need more involvement from the community. We need more people with lived experience, and those folks who are just everyday residents of Charleston and Charleston County. Could you say more about that in terms of why do you think it's important for folks to get involved, and particularly get involved with the CJCC? And I know you have some slides that you want to share during this time as well.
Well, yeah, ways to get engaged. For me, as I said, I served approximately 19 years in the South Carolina Department of Correction. And it was important for me that, I kind of be in the number, if decisions were being made about my life, my loved one's life, those who were affected by my incarceration. In this room, I felt like it was important for me to be in that space. But as you say, we do have, you can, some of the uh, the clips that she is going to show kind of gives you a breast of some of the different ways that you can get involved as a community representative, in which I am. We have community representatives from different spaces, as you see: local faith-based, local nonprofit, local healthcare, local businesses, local defense bar, local criminal crime survivor, previously incarcerated community. In fact, I think these are the ones who are up for uh, no, not necessarily these ones are up for, but we have this a great array of community representatives who represent different facets, different agency, different areas, whether when it comes to the community. Um, and it's just, I mean, I can't stress it enough that the proximity, that those who are proximate to the problems are the ones more better prepared to help in fixing it. So whether you someone with lived experience or you're a crime survivor, as I also am, losing a son to gun violence. When I walked into that room and I seen my actual victim advocate from my charge sitting in that room, sharing information about crime survivors and things that that maybe nobody in that room knew about, because they've never been per se a crime survivor. So when they're in there advocating for me and talking to the law enforcement officer or the supervisor who's over the law enforcement officer who may have been in the jurisdiction where my crime was committed, how great is that to have them in that conversation and not chasing each other over the telephones. You have the defense bar and you have the healthcare business. So it was just an amazing thing when you walk into that room. Um, Open seats for even year openings. Yeah, thank you, Kristy, for clarifying that. But open seats for even year are opening now. But I just think it's very important that we have the buy-in from the community. We have them at the table sharing their opinion, um, recognizing, as I think Judge Steinberg said, that when you walk into that room, there's no big eyes in there and little U's. There's none of that inside that room with all these amazing, influential, some appointed, some elected individuals. We have these type of this event, this lived experience dialogue was something that we've been doing, these engaging the community, right, wanting the community to be involved. This lived experience dialogue, we've been working in these spaces during the summer. Now mind you, COVID kind of definitely put a damper on things, and it changed a little bit of how we were able to communicate with the community. But best believe that we are back now, doing the best we can to engage the community, to get the community come out to these events, where you may be choosing to be trained by everyday democracy, which works in hand with CJCC. You may be trained to kind of facilitate maybe a roundtable discussion on the criminal justice system. How amazing is that, right? All of a sudden, you're here getting trained and you're facilitating roundtable discussions. You know, people with lived experience, survivors of crime, and so on. So it's just a great, great, great opportunity that I think a lot of people don't realize. You know, that is available to anybody. All citizens here in Charleston County could come to an actual CJCC meeting. You can actually apply to be a community representative. So,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Keith, for that. And continuing that call for action, the additional ways that folks can get involved with the CJCC or with what's just happening in the local community. You are invited to attend the CJCC monthly meetings. You can find the date and time of those meetings on the website. There is a social media platform that you can also tap into and find out what's going on. Again, staying informed so that you can be of better service to yourself and to others, and also signing up for the email newsletter. So again, so many ways and so many opportunities to get involved with your local community. The community is the partner. It's a partner. It's not a stepchild. It's not an ex-partner. It's a current partner that has to be engaged in order for everyone in Charleston to really be able to live and experience the best quality of life that they can. We are so excited and we just really appreciate your being a part of tonight's session. I don't want to leave anyone out. If there were comments or questions in the chat, please take a minute to put those, if you would like to put those in the chat, and we will definitely try. And all of this, okay, can I get one of my folks to, it's so many coming on. How is the CJCC addressing the gun charges that are the most frequent? And I missed the rest of that question. So I could respond, but so you're asking about a specific issue as it relates to gun violence. And so you're talking about policy change in a sense. And so I would ask one of the panelists to address that very quickly.
I'll jump in on this. In terms of a gun court, that's not something that we're discussing right now. Obviously, in Charleston and across this country, everyone is now paying attention to gun safety, what's going on, the gun charges. As a bond court judge, as any judge, we have to do what the statutes say. If I was sitting in bond court and someone comes in with gun charges, I have to give them a bond. This is not a charge that's going to keep them from getting a bond. And in terms of it being prosecuted, the solicitor's office is paying attention. They're doing everything they can to wrap their arms around it. And we're all paying attention. And as we said earlier, through the CJCC, we are tracking the numbers. Kristy, I think you may want to add to that also.
Yeah, I was looking at my other screen to bring up the link to the solicitor's report on disparity in prosecution, because there's some interesting facts in there as well. So it's not just, we see them as the most frequent local charges coming into our jail. In the beginning, some possession of marijuana was the #1 charge. Now we're seeing, as those things sort of fall off, other charges rise up. And we've seen unlawful carry become the most frequently booked charge, local charge in our jail. This is a huge issue. It's a community issue. There's questions of safety. There's questions of why I feel the need to carry a gun. I'm actually really looking forward to, and I know this isn't a direct answer to the question, but these dialogues that are coming up, being able to talk with folks who are survivors of crime in an intimate setting, and really dialogue, with folks who have been through the system. to have these different notes, to really talk through these issues, these challenges. There's so many people that feel the need to carry a gun, and I guess the other question we have to ask is why, and what can we do as a community, as a collective CJCC, as a broader community to help really lift up the importance of gun safety, and help. I think one of the things that we do at the local community is we look at the data and we learn lessons, and we provide a rich evidence base of knowledge that we hope our policymakers who can work in legislative spaces can use. Can help put that information to good use. We are a learning ground in many ways, an innovation, location for our state. And as we look at these things, I think it's also important that we look outside of our state as well to see what's working elsewhere. I will say, when it comes to gun violence, one of the sources I like to look to a lot for helpful information is the Council on Criminal Justice. They have a whole task force on gun violence, and there's some good information out there. So to answer the question specifically, it is a big issue. It is worthy of looking deeper into, and it's also worthy of looking to what the research says and where the opportunities are, and recognizing kind of what we can do locally, as well as how we can help to shape bigger conversations that will go on in legislative spaces too.
And if I can just add quickly, as I said I am one with lived experience, but I'm also a survivor of crime. I lost a 17-year-old son to gun violence in 2016 here in the North Charleston neighborhood. Another, I think advantage is something, if I can say a vantage point, I would say then for me in being in the CJCC, with all due respect, right, I get to sit amongst individuals from the law enforcement agency, and maybe not during the meeting. We won't have that conversation, right? After the meeting, I get to share some conversations and get some ideas about some of the things that are working. That close, intimate, one-on-one conversation gives me a little relief in believing that, as gleam as it might seem, right, we're going through a whole lot. I work at MUSC in the Hospital Violence Intervention Program to combat gun violence, and these new programs are coming up to kind of figure out this issue, right? When you can talk to a law enforcement officer, or as Judge Steinberg is saying, victim advocate, you're coming into this space with a sense of decency and order and respect. And you just never know what kind of comfort you may come out there with. No, you won't bring a loved one back, but of course this is a very serious issue. But I always think about the CJCC and how these system actors are all working together to try to figure out even that. As big as that is, as ugly as it is, and as damaging as it can be to our communities, you definitely have people in this room working to try to figure out that at the best of their ability. So
Thank you for that, Keith. Thank you. Thanks to each of you for sharing additional information and expounding on that. And it just really speaks to the level of commitment that each of you have, again, from the early introductions, that you all serve in different roles, but you're unified in that want and that positive outcome for the best for Charleston and for Charleston County. So thank you guys so much for that. I do want to acknowledge that the other panelist who was scheduled to be here tonight is actually our own Captain Jason Bruder of the Charleston Police Department, who was not able to be here, but who had certainly prepared and planned to be a part of this conversation and discussion on this evening. But we know that he is currently out, be on duty, taking care of the folks in Charleston, because we understand was some serious unrest and issues at hand that happened very recently, and is still an active case at this time. But we want to thank him for planning and preparing to be a part of this conversation. I do want to again just say thank you to all who logged on and stayed with us throughout this conversation, listening to the numbers and the data, and then understanding that there's a narrative behind the number, there's stories to these numbers. And so it's not just information for us, but it's real lives, it's real truth. And so again, we appreciate you taking the time to learn what we've learned and to be able to be informed and to help inform others. My name is Gwen Wright. I serve with Everyday Democracy, and we have been a partner of the CJCC and Charleston County in their community engagement efforts for a number of years now. We also, as an organization, are learning from Charleston and Charleston County and from all of the wonderful people who make up the team that we work with. A sincere thank you on behalf of Everyday Democracy and for the opportunity to continue to work with you in this meaningful and very important way. With that being said, I think we've come to the conclusion of our evening together. We do hope that we have shared and said something that will help make your lives and the lives of your loved ones better. Continue to stay engaged, continue to seek information, become empowered, understand that all of the work, all of the change only can make a difference and start to happen if you're willing to get involved and to stay engaged. We have one more question, so I don't want to close out without acknowledging that question.
And Gwen, if you want, I can, or Judge.
Yes.
I think one of the question in the chat, has to do with disparities in prosecution.
Okay.
And one of the, it's a long question, so I'm still reading it, but I really encourage for folks who haven't had the chance to read that disparity in prosecution report that I put the link in earlier to check it out. The highest dismissal rate in that report that was found for both Black and white men are for person, gun, and domestic violence crimes. And one of with the research, it says it may be driven by challenges of prosecuting crimes with the victim or where there are multiple individuals arrested for the crime, and that there were statistically significant differences in dismissal rates for Black men compared to white men for person crimes. That's a wonky data speak, but at the end of the day, it's data that's pointing to the need to look more and do more. Earlier screening, I know that's one of the pilots that the solicitor's office has put through there. When a charge is made by law enforcement, when prosecutors look at it and start going through that, and then whatever happens in the negotiations with defense across the life of the case, that's such a black box that really is worth looking deeper into. And I think the data and the information, the stories, a lot of the work that's going on, as we learn more about the impacts of disproportionalities and disparities, we start to see more and more of this data. The CJCC, is actually starting to commission a planning group, to host a convening to say, okay, we've got a lot of this good information. What do we do with it? How do we act on it? How do we digest it? And how do we make very practical, action-oriented steps that can lower the inequities and have a safer, fairer, more just system for the community? So the long-winded way of touching on the answer to say that there's more to be learned and there's more to look at, and the fact that we're all paying attention to how the system is serving all of us, it is really the key takeaway there, because it's not just the cop, it's not just the defense attorney, it's not just the prosecutor, it's not just the judge. It is every part of the system, and every decision maker matters in that, and how we can learn from that and grow from that can really help us have a system that works better for everybody. Judge, did you want to add anything to that?
The only thing that I would throw in is that for Emily, who asked this question, Solicitor Wilson does sit with us at the CJCC meeting. She also has somebody from her office, and she's very much engaged and keeps track and participates with us. I just wanted to make that clear.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Kristy. Thank you, Judge Steinberg. Keith, any last words before we sign off?
Engage, community. I'll be honest. Sometimes I get a little lonely. I need to see more of my community engaged in this process, and it's an amazing experience with the CJCC. We are here. The door is open. I will welcome you. They will welcome you. You can come sit by me. Give me a call. I think my information is available if you need any more coaching and coaching to get in here. Engage, community engage. It is important. It matters. It makes a difference. Community engagement is needed. Go to the link. Go to the website. We're looking for more community representatives. Sign up and get involved in the local criminal justice system with the Charleston County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to close out. Thank you, Charleston, for being a part of this evening's discussion. Thank you so much. Until the next time, stay well.
Thank you.